The sun hung low over the golden fields of wheat, casting long shadows across the land. James Carter leaned against the wooden fence, arms resting over the top rail, as he watched his cattle graze in the open pasture. The rhythmic sound of the wind rustling the crops was a soothing melody, one he had grown accustomed to over the years. His farm stretched far beyond what the eye could see, a vast expanse of rolling fields, a barn full of livestock, and a humble farmhouse that had belonged to his family for generations. It was a peaceful life, a life of early mornings, hard work, and quiet evenings. But it was also a lonely life. James sighed as he rubbed the back of his neck, his gaze drifting toward the dirt road leading to town. Not many people came by his farm unless they were delivering supplies or needing a favor. He wasn't unfriendly, but he had learned that most people preferred the city. They liked the noise, the fast pace, the endless distractions. He had tried dating a few times, some local girls, a couple from town, even one or two who claimed they didn't mind the farm life. But they always left, tired of the isolation, of waking up before dawn to feed the animals, of the dirt and the hard labor. James was a man who believed in simple pleasures. He didn't need fancy restaurants or expensive vacations. He wanted someone who could sit with him on the porch, watch the sunset, and find peace in the quiet. Someone who wouldn't run when the work got hard. But maybe that was too much to ask. Daisy, his favorite mare, nudged his shoulder, pulling him from his thoughts. He chuckled, reaching up to scratch behind her ears. "You're the only one who sticks around, huh?" The horse huffed softly, as if in agreement. James adjusted his hat and grabbed a bucket of feed, heading toward the stable. The evening routine was always the same: feed the animals, check the fences, make sure everything was in order before heading inside. It was predictable. Reliable. But that night, everything would change. James wiped his hands on his jeans as he stepped inside the farmhouse, the scent of pine wood and warm bread lingering in the air. He washed up at the sink, enjoying the cool water against his calloused skin. It was just another evening on the farm. Then, the commotion started. A sharp, panicked cry from the barn made him freeze. Then came the sound of hooves stomping against the dirt, the frantic neighing of the horses. James's heart leapt into his throat. Something was wrong. Grabbing the rifle from the door, he bolted outside. His boots thudded against the wooden porch as he scanned the yard. The animals were restless, moving in every direction. His cattle had backed away from the fence, their eyes wide. And then he saw her. A figure stood in the mud near the horse pen, completely drenched, her orange fur streaked with dirt. She was crouched, running her fingers through Daisy's mane, her long, feline tail flicking behind her. The mare, usually cautious around strangers, stood still, letting the woman stroke her. James's grip on the rifle tightened. "Who the hell are you?" The woman turned, golden eyes locking onto his. A slow grin spread across her face. "Oh, you must be the farmer." James narrowed his eyes. His heart was still pounding, but not from fear. This woman, if she even was a woman, had features that didn't belong to any human. Her ears were pointed, twitching at every sound. Her tail swayed lazily behind her. She was tall and lean, her fur sleek despite the mud. She had an otherworldly beauty, her movements fluid, almost hypnotic. James swallowed hard. "I'll ask again. Who are you, and what are you doing messing with my animals?" She laughed, standing up and stretching. "I wasn't messing with them. I was saying hello." James took a step forward. "You're covered in mud. You lost or something?" She smirked. "Not lost. Just landed in the wrong spot." James frowned. "Landed?" She wiped some mud from her arm. "Yeah. You see, I came in a pod. From my planet." James stared. "You what?" She sighed dramatically. "All right, fine. I guess I should explain." She pointed to herself. "I'm Lyrian. I was sent from my home planet a long time ago. My people put me in a pod and sent me to Earth." James wasn't sure whether to laugh, call the sheriff, or just walk back inside. You expect me to believe you're some kind of alien? Lyrian grinned. Believe whatever you want, farmer. But I was sent here for a reason. James crossed his arms. And what reason is that? She took a step closer, her tail flicking against his leg. I was chosen to find someone. James tensed. Find who? She poked his chest lightly. You. Silence stretched between them. The only sound was the distant rustling of the wheat fields. James exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. You're a strange one. Lyrian purred, a real, honest-to-God purr. I get that a lot. James eyed her suspiciously. You need to get cleaned up. Come inside before you scare the cows. Lyrian beamed. Ooh, inviting me in already? Bold move, farmer. James muttered under his breath as he turned back toward the house. This was going to be an interesting night. James held the door open as Lyrian stepped inside, shaking off clumps of mud from her fur. She moved with a lazy confidence, taking in her surroundings with curiosity. Cozy, she remarked, running a clawed finger along the wooden dining table. Smells good in here. James watched her warily, still unsure what to make of her. She was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and yet, here she was, dripping mud onto his clean floor and acting like she belonged. Bathroom's down the hall, he muttered, tossing her a towel. Get cleaned up. Lyrian caught it with ease, flashing a playful grin. You're a gentleman. I like that. James rolled his eyes and turned toward the kitchen. As she disappeared down the hall, he got to work preparing dinner. His mind raced as he chopped vegetables, his hands working on autopilot. He wanted to believe this was some elaborate prank, but deep down, he knew better. The way she moved, the way her eyes gleamed in the dim light, she wasn't human. A few minutes later, the bathroom door creaked open, and James glanced up from the stove. Lyrian emerged, freshly cleaned, her orange fur sleek and fluffy. She had wrapped herself in one of his flannel shirts, the fabric draping over her frame like a dress. She stretched, yawning, then gave him a sly look. Didn't have anything in my size, she teased, tugging at the hem. James cleared his throat, turning back to the pan sizzling on the stove. Sit down. Food's almost ready. Lyrian slid into a chair, watching him with amusement. You're taking this surprisingly well. James scoffed. Oh, trust me, I got plenty of questions. But first we eat. Moments later, he set 2 plates down, a simple but hearty meal of grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and fresh corn. Lyrian's tail flicked as she picked up her fork, sniffing the food before taking a bite. Her ears perked up. This is amazing. James smirked. Good to know aliens like home-cooked meals. Lyrian chuckled. Hey, I've been eating ration bars for way too long. This is heaven. They ate in relative silence for a few minutes before James finally leaned back in his chair. All right, he said. Start talking. Who are you really? And why are you here? Lyrian wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, setting her fork down. I told you. My planet was destroyed. The empire that did it, they don't just stop. They take, they consume, and when there's nothing left, they move on to the next. James frowned. And you were sent here to, what? Warn us? She shook her head. No. I was chosen to survive. My people knew they couldn't stop what was coming, so they sent me in a pod, hoping I'd find someone who could help. James's brow furrowed. Why me? Lyrian shrugged. I don't know. Maybe fate? Maybe dumb luck? Or maybe you're exactly who I need. James exhaled slowly, rubbing his face. This is insane. Lyrian leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. Yeah? And yet here I am. James had no response to that. For years, he had wanted something more, something beyond the mundane routine of farm life. But he never imagined it would arrive in the form of an alien woman with fur as orange as a harvest sunset. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. James woke to the sound of silence. The birds outside weren't singing. The wind wasn't rustling through the wheat fields. Even the usual creaking of the old house settling was absent. Something was wrong. He sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The previous night's conversation with Lyrian felt like a dream, but the faint scent of her fur still lingered in the air. Throwing on a flannel shirt, he stepped out of his bedroom and into the hallway. He found Lyrian in the kitchen, perched on the counter, crunching on an apple. She grinned. "Morning, farmer." James ignored the way his stomach twisted at the sight of her looking so at home. "Something's off." Lyrian's expression sobered. "You feel it too?" James nodded. "Phone's dead. TV's static." Lyrian hopped down from the counter. "We should check outside." James grabbed his boots and stepped onto the porch. The moment he did, his stomach dropped. The weather vane on top of the barn spun erratically in all directions. The cattle were uneasy, huddled together as if sensing an invisible threat. The sky, though cloudless, felt wrong. Lyrian stood beside him, her golden eyes scanning the horizon. "It's starting." James turned to her. "What's starting?" She met his gaze, her voice low. "They're coming." James clenched his jaw. He wasn't sure of who they were, but he knew one thing: he wasn't about to sit around and wait. "We're going into town," he said. Lyrian smirked. "Road trip already? I like you, farmer." James shot her a look. "Get in the truck." The drive into town was eerily quiet. James gripped the wheel, his mind racing. Lyrian lounged in the passenger seat, watching the scenery with mild amusement. "You don't seem too worried," James muttered. Lyrian shrugged. "I've been preparing for this moment my whole life." James tightened his grip. "Must be nice." As they pulled into town, people turned to stare. It wasn't every day that a man walked in with a feline woman beside him. James ignored the looks, heading straight for the police station. Inside, officers were scrambling, shouting over each other about the phone lines going dead and the power fluctuations. Then, everything stopped the moment Lyrian stepped inside. James stepped forward. "Something's happening. We need to contact the government." The sheriff, a grizzled man in his 50s, narrowed his eyes. "And who the hell is she?" James didn't hesitate. "She's the reason we need to make that call." Before the sheriff could respond, a deafening roar filled the air. James ran outside just in time to see massive military helicopters descending over the town square. Soldiers poured out, their weapons drawn. A tall man in uniform stepped forward, his face unreadable. "James Carter?" James nodded, uneasy. The officer turned to Lyrian. "We've been expecting you." James's breath caught. The officer continued. "Your planet's leaders sent us messages years ago. We've been preparing. But now it's time." Lyrian squeezed James's hand. "Looks like you're coming with me, farmer." James took a deep breath, realizing that his quiet farm life was over. Whatever was happening, it was just beginning. The sound of the helicopter blades slicing through the air was deafening. Dust swirled through the streets of the small town as the military presence cast an eerie stillness over everything. People stood frozen on the sidewalks, staring as armed soldiers moved with precision, their boots hitting the pavement with practiced authority. James had always thought he was the kind of man who could handle just about anything. But standing in front of a group of military personnel, their weapons at the ready, while a feline alien woman held his hand, this was well beyond anything he had ever prepared for. Lyrian, however, seemed completely unbothered. She watched the uniformed man before them with narrowed golden eyes, her tail flicking behind her in slow, lazy motions. The officer stepped forward, his posture rigid. "My name is Commander Grayson. I'm in charge of this operation. You two need to come with us." "Now." James frowned, keeping his stance firm. "Where exactly are we going?" Grayson didn't blink. "To a classified location where we can discuss the situation properly. You've been caught up in something much bigger than you realize." James crossed his arms. "And if I say no?" Grayson's lips twitched into something that might have been amusement. "Then you'll be forcibly detained and questioned anyway." Lyrian chuckled beside him. "See? Told you were special, farmer. James shot her a look but sighed in resignation. He didn't have much of a choice, did he? He wasn't about to leave Lyrian to deal with this alone. With a sharp nod, James said, Fine. But you'd better start giving us some answers. Soon enough, Grayson replied. The soldiers flanked them as they were led toward the massive black helicopter waiting in the middle of the street. The townspeople continued to stare, whispering amongst themselves. James didn't like how some of them looked at Lyrian, not with fear exactly, but with something close to it. As they climbed into the helicopter, James took a final glance at the town he had known his entire life. He had a feeling he wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. The doors slammed shut, and moments later, the aircraft lifted off the ground. James had never been in a helicopter before. The way it moved, tilting and swaying through the sky, made his stomach churn. He clenched the straps of his seatbelt, gritting his teeth as the world below them grew smaller. Lyrian, on the other hand, looked entirely at ease. She gazed out the window with fascination, her ears twitching at the whirring of the rotors. James leaned toward her. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She grinned. It's my first time flying on this kind of craft. Yours too, I assume? James exhaled sharply. Yeah, and I'd rather be on solid ground. Lyrian's tail curled slightly, and she smirked. You'd get used to it. James wasn't sure he wanted to. Commander Grayson sat across from them, watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. After a few moments, he spoke. We've known about extraterrestrial life for decades, he said bluntly. What the public doesn't know is that Earth has been in contact with several alien civilizations. Some are peaceful. Others are not. James raised an eyebrow. And you just let us think we're alone out here? Grayson gave him a sharp look. Humanity isn't ready for the truth. James scoffed, but before he could say more, Lyrian leaned forward. You said you were expecting me? Grayson nodded. Your leader sent us messages. Years ago, they warned us about the coming invasion. About the empire that destroyed your homeworld. We've been monitoring deep space transmissions ever since, and based on recent activity, we think they're coming sooner than expected. James felt a cold chill run down his spine. And what exactly are we supposed to do about that? Grayson studied them for a moment. That's what we need to discuss. The helicopter ride lasted another hour before they finally landed at a remote facility in the middle of nowhere. The building was massive, built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by layers of security. As the doors opened, James hesitated. He wasn't sure what he was stepping into, but he knew there was no turning back now. Lyrian gave him a reassuring nudge. Come on, farmer. Let's see what secrets they've been keeping. The inside of the facility was like something out of a science fiction movie. Sleek metal hallways stretched in every direction, security personnel stationed at every corner. There were no windows, no natural light, just the steady hum of fluorescent panels casting an artificial glow over everything. James was led down a series of corridors, his boots echoing against the floor. Lyrian walked beside him, her eyes scanning every detail with keen interest. Eventually, they entered a large, circular chamber filled with massive screens, holographic displays, and advanced machinery. Several men and women in lab coats were busy at work, examining alien artifacts and deciphering transmissions. Grayson turned to them. Welcome to Project Sentinel. James exhaled, shaking his head. This is insane. Lyrian, however, looked impressed. Not bad. I was expecting something less prepared. A woman in a military uniform approached, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. She held a tablet, scrolling through data. Commander, the deep space scans just updated. We're detecting movement near the outer rim of the solar system. Grayson's expression darkened. How many ships? The woman hesitated. Too many. James clenched his fists. You're saying they're already here? Lyrian's playful demeanor faded. They're testing us. Seeing how prepared we are before they strike. Grayson nodded. Which is why we need you. James frowned. Me? I'm just a farmer. Grayson's gaze was unreadable. Not anymore. Lyrian turned to James, her golden eyes serious. I told you I was meant to find someone. It wasn't just chance. You were chosen. James felt like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. His quiet life, his simple routine, gone. And in its place, an uncertain future. All right, he said, exhaling. What do we do? Grayson gave a rare smile. We fight back. James had spent his entire life tending to crops and caring for animals. He never thought he'd be standing inside a classified military base, discussing the fate of the planet. And yet, here he was, shoulder to shoulder with an alien woman who had crash-landed into his world less than a day ago. He ran a hand down his face, trying to process everything. So, let me get this straight, he said, glancing between Lyrian and Commander Grayson. You're telling me Earth has known about aliens for years, that some galactic empire destroyed Lyrian's home, and now those same bastards are headed straight for us. Grayson gave a firm nod. That's exactly what I'm telling you. James exhaled slowly, shaking his head. And where do I fit into all this? What am I supposed to do? Lyrian stepped closer, her golden eyes locking onto his. James, I didn't just find you by accident. My pod was sent here because my people believed there was someone on this planet who could help me complete my mission. James frowned. And what's your mission? To stop them, she said, voice steady. To stop the Empire before they do to Earth what they did to my home. James let out a dry laugh. You make it sound like I'm supposed to be some kind of hero. Grayson's expression remained unreadable. You're the only civilian to have direct contact with Lyrian's species. That alone makes you valuable. And considering you're the one she trusts, we're willing to trust you, too. James scoffed. Trust me to do what, exactly? I don't know a damn thing about space wars or aliens. I know how to fix fences, plant wheat, and milk cows. Lyrian smirked. Could be useful. Maybe the Empire's greatest weakness is dairy products. James shot her a look. Not the time. Grayson cleared his throat. We don't expect you to lead the charge, Mr. Carter. But we do need all the help we can get. If Lyrian was sent here with information, we need to extract it. And if the Empire is already in the system, we need to act now. Lyrian's ears twitched. So, what's the plan? The commander turned to the woman in uniform, who had been waiting quietly nearby. Captain Rains, show them the data. She nodded and pressed a button on her tablet. The lights dimmed, and a massive holographic projection of the solar system appeared before them. Tiny red blips flickered along the outer edges of the map, steadily moving inward. These ships appeared within the last 48 hours. Rains explained. They're maintaining a cautious distance, but make no mistake, they're observing us. James stared at the display, his stomach twisting. How long before they make a move? Grayson folded his arms. Could be days. Could be hours. James dragged a hand through his hair. Jesus! Lyrian's expression was unreadable as she studied the projection. Then, her tail flicked, and she turned back to James. I know this is overwhelming. But you're part of this now, whether you like it or not. James blew out a breath. Yeah. I kind of figured that out when I got shoved into a helicopter. She smirked. So are you in? James met her gaze. It was insane. Completely, utterly insane. But something in his gut told him that if he walked away now, he'd regret it for the rest of his life. Yeah, he said. I'm in. Lyrian grinned. Good answer. After the briefing, James and Lyrian were led through the facility, past secure checkpoints and heavily guarded corridors. James had never seen anything like it, walls lined with monitors, research stations filled with strange alien technology, scientists working around the clock. Lyrian, however, seemed unfazed. This is impressive, she admitted. I expected Earth's military to be way more primitive. Grayson smirked. We don't advertise our advancements. James glanced around. Yeah, no kidding. They arrived at a laboratory where a group of scientists were studying a large metallic object. its surface covered in intricate alien markings. Lyrian's eyes widened slightly. Where did you get that? One of the scientists, an older man with graying hair, looked up from his work. It was recovered decades ago from a crash site in New Mexico. James raised an eyebrow. Wait. Roswell? You're telling me that was real? The scientist chuckled. It was the first of many. James blew out a breath. I don't know whether to be impressed or terrified. Lyrian stepped closer to the artifact, running her fingers over the strange symbols. This is old. Really old. The scientist nodded. We've spent years trying to decode it. If you recognize any of these markings, it's a distress beacon. Lyrian interrupted, her tone serious. The room went silent. Grayson stepped forward. Explain. Lyrian traced the engravings. This was a message sent out by a dying civilization. A warning. My people believe there were others before us, planets that fell to the Empire long before they reached us. She turned back to them. This proves it. James's stomach twisted. You're saying they've been wiping out planets for centuries? Lyrian nodded. And Earth is next on the list. Grayson exchanged a look with Captain Rains. We need to accelerate the defense strategy. James crossed his arms. What exactly is the plan? Just wait for them to show up and hope for the best. Grayson's expression darkened. No. We're going to take the fight to them. Lyrian's ears perked up. Now that's interesting. Grayson gestured for them to follow. We've been developing countermeasures. Earth may not have intergalactic warships, but we're not defenseless. We've been reverse engineering recovered technology for decades. James's mind was spinning. Less than 24 hours ago, he had been feeding his horses. Now, he was in the middle of a secret military base, listening to war plans against an alien empire. Lyrian nudged him playfully. You okay, farmer? You look like your brain's about to short-circuit. James exhaled sharply. I'm fine. Just processing. Lyrian chuckled. You're handling this better than I expected. Grayson led them down another corridor until they reached a set of reinforced doors. With a press of a code, the doors slid open, revealing a massive underground hangar. James's eyes widened. Dozens of sleek, alien-like ships lined the hangar, surrounded by teams of engineers. Pilots in flight suits were undergoing training, and large holographic battle maps covered the far wall. This, Grayson said, is Earth's first interstellar fleet. James let out a low whistle. Okay. Now I'm impressed. Lyrian crossed her arms, studying the ships. Not bad. But are they ready for war? Grayson's expression was grim. They'll have to be. James clenched his jaw. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be easy. And whether he liked it or not, he was part of it now. James had never been inside a military base before, much less one that housed an entire fleet of interstellar ships. He walked between the massive hangar bays, feeling small among the towering spacecraft that Earth had secretly been building for years. Grayson and Captain Rains led James and Lyrian deeper into the facility, passing engineers who were busy welding armor plating and testing energy-based weapons. Pilots ran through simulations on glowing consoles, their faces set with grim determination. James exhaled. This is insane. You're telling me that Earth has been sitting on a fleet of space fighters this whole time? Grayson nodded. We've known this day would come. We just didn't know when. Lyrian tapped the hull of one of the ships, her tail swishing. Not bad. Looks like you've been reverse engineering alien tech. Captain Rains crossed her arms. It's a mix. Some designs are based on what we've recovered, but we've made improvements. We had to adapt quickly, considering the threat we're facing. James frowned. And what exactly is the plan? You said we're taking the fight to them, but how? Grayson gestured for them to follow him into a command room. Inside, a massive holographic display of the solar system flickered to life. Red markers dotted the outer edges near Pluto, steadily moving toward Earth's orbit. This, Grayson said, is their fleet. James swallowed hard. How many? Captain Rains spoke up. We estimate at least 50 capital ships. Thousands of smaller fighters. James clenched his jaw. And we have what? A handful of ships that have never seen real combat. Grayson's face was unreadable. It's not just about the numbers. We know their tactics. We have technology they don't know we've developed. And most importantly, we have you. James blinked. Excuse me? Lyrian raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I was wondering when you were going to explain that part. Grayson turned to Lyrian. Your people sent messages to us, warning us of the invasion, but they also included classified data, coordinates, weaknesses, and most importantly, genetic markers. Lyrian's ears twitched. What kind of markers? Grayson hesitated, then turned to James. Your DNA matches a specific genetic sequence that was embedded in the distress call from Lyrian's people. James stared at him. My what? Lyrian's tail flicked, her expression unreadable. So you're saying he's connected to my species? Grayson nodded. We don't know how or why, but James Carter's DNA matches a pattern in the signal we received. Your people didn't just send a warning, Lyrian. They sent us him. James felt his stomach drop. That makes no damn sense. I was born and raised on Earth. My parents were farmers, same as their parents before them. Lyrian studied him for a long moment, then slowly smiled. Well, well, farmer. Looks like you're more special than you thought. James scowled. I'm not buying it. Captain Rains pulled up another hologram, showing a sequence of glowing, unfamiliar strands of DNA. The Empire has been wiping out civilizations for centuries. But there was always a theory. What if some of those species found ways to survive? What if remnants of them existed, in hiding? James took a step back, his mind racing. You're saying I'm part alien? Grayson crossed his arms. We're saying you might be the key to stopping this war. James ran a hand through his hair. This was too much. Way too much. He had gone from tending his farm to being told he might be the missing link to an ancient galactic battle. Lyrian, however, seemed intrigued. She stepped closer, her golden eyes searching his face. Guess that means we were meant to find each other, huh? James exhaled sharply. Lucky me. Grayson's voice cut through the tension. Whether you believe it or not, we need your help. There's a reason Lyrian's people marked your DNA in their transmission. And we intend to find out why. James swallowed hard. He didn't know what was coming next, but one thing was clear. His old life was gone. And the fate of Earth might just rest in his hands. The next few days were a blur of tests, briefings, and training. James found himself subjected to every kind of scan imaginable, blood tests, neural mapping, even simulations to test his reflexes. Lyrian was there every step of the way, watching with amusement as he tried, and mostly failed, to keep up with the advanced technology. So, she drawled, leaning against the console as James struggled with a flight simulation. How does it feel to go from milking cows to piloting spacecraft? James gritted his teeth, yanking the controls to the left as his simulated fighter spun out of control. I'm about 2 seconds from throwing up. Lyrian smirked. You'll get used to it. James groaned as the screen flash simulation failed in bright red letters. He ripped off the flight helmet and slumped in his chair. This is impossible. Captain Rains, who had been observing, crossed her arms. Your instincts are good, but your technique is terrible. James scowled. Appreciate the pep talk. Lyrian patted his shoulder. Hey, at least you didn't crash too horribly. James shot her a look. Thanks, that really helps. Rains sighed. We don't have time to train you like we would a normal recruit. If what we suspect is true, your connection to Lyrian's species may be the only thing that can turn the tide of this war. James leaned forward. And how exactly am I supposed to do that? Grayson, who had been standing quietly, finally spoke. We need to put you in a real ship. James's eyes widened. Wait, what? Lyrian grinned. Oh, this I have to see. Before James could protest, alarms blared through the facility. A voice crackled over the intercom. Unauthorized ship detected entering Earth's atmosphere. High-energy signatures. Possible enemy scout. Grayson's expression hardened. They're here. Lyrian's ears flattened. They're scouting our defenses. James felt adrenaline spike through his veins. He had spent his whole life isolated on his farm, never expecting to be part of something this massive. But now, there was no denying it. The fight had come to Earth. And he was right in the middle of it. The alarms continued to blare, filling the facility with an eerie red glow. Soldiers and scientists rushed through the hallways, voices raised in urgent chatter. The entire base had shifted into high alert. James stood frozen for a moment, staring at the flashing warning lights. A part of him still felt like he was dreaming, like he was going to wake up back on his farm, with the only pressing concern being whether the fence needed fixing. But this was real. The enemy was here. Commander Grayson was already barking orders. Get tracking on that ship. I want all fighters on standby. If they make a move, we intercept immediately. Captain Rains turned to Lyrian. Can your people's technology override their transmissions? We need to know if they're sending data back to their fleet. Lyrian frowned, her ears twitching. I can try, but their encryption is advanced. We don't have much time. James exhaled sharply. What happens if they do send a signal? Grayson's expression was grim. Then it means their full fleet is coming. And soon. James clenched his jaw. He was just one man. What was he supposed to do against an entire empire? Lyrian seemed to sense his unease. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her golden eyes meeting his. We're not alone in this, farmer. James let out a slow breath, nodding. He wasn't sure he believed he was special, but right now, it didn't matter. They had to act. The command center's massive holographic display flickered, zooming in on the unidentified enemy ship that had entered Earth's atmosphere. It was a sleek, black vessel, moving at impossible speeds. They're scanning us, Rains muttered, her fingers flying across the console. James could see smaller blips moving to intercept the intruder, Earth's own fleet, launching from hidden bases around the planet. Grayson turned to James and Lyrian. We need to send our own response. We can't let them think Earth is defenseless. Lyrian grinned. You're saying we get to take a ship? Grayson nodded. Your knowledge of their technology gives us an advantage. And as for Carter, he smirked. We need to see what he's capable of. James's stomach twisted. You really think I'm ready to fly one of those things? Rains motioned toward the hangar. You're about to find out. Before James could protest, Lyrian grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the launching bay. Come on, farmer, she said, her tail swishing behind her. Time to fly. The ship was unlike anything James had ever seen. It was sleek, angular, its hull gleaming under the harsh lights of the hangar. Lyrian climbed into the cockpit first, her movements fluid and confident. James hesitated, staring at the controls. I don't know what I'm doing, he muttered. Lyrian patted the co-pilot's seat. Good thing I do. Now get in. James sighed and settled into the seat. The moment he did, the cockpit screens flared to life. Strange symbols scrolled across the display, symbols James shouldn't have been able to understand. But somehow, he could. Lyrian noticed his stunned expression. You're reading that, aren't you? James swallowed hard. Yeah. I am. Lyrian smirked. Looks like your DNA is unlocking more than just your fate, farmer. James didn't have time to dwell on it. The hangar doors slid open, revealing the dark sky beyond. Rains's voice crackled over the intercom. You are clear for launch. Lyrian's fingers danced over the controls. The ship rumbled beneath them, engines roaring to life. James gripped the seat. This is a bad idea. Lyrian grinned. Too late. And then they were airborne. The force of acceleration pressed James back against his seat as the ship rocketed upward. Clouds whipped past in a blur, the blue sky darkening as they ascended into the upper atmosphere. Ahead, the enemy scout ship loomed, sleek and menacing. Lyrian's expression hardened. They know we're here. James watched as the enemy ship shifted its trajectory, angling toward them. A chill ran down his spine. They're not running, he muttered. Lyrian's fingers tightened around the controls. No. They're testing us. The radio crackled. Grayson's voice came through. Do not let them escape. If they send a transmission back to their fleet, we lose any chance of surprise. Lyrian grinned. Got it. The enemy ship suddenly accelerated, streaking past them in a blur. Lyrian yanked the controls, twisting their own fighter into a sharp turn. James's stomach lurched. Oh, hell! Lyrian laughed. You'll get used to it. The enemy ship banked hard, trying to shake them. James's instincts screamed at him. Something told him exactly where the ship was going to move next. Before he could think about it, he grabbed the targeting controls and fired. The energy blast shot forward, direct hits against the enemy ship's shields. Lyrian's eyes widened. Nice shot, farmer! James was too stunned to respond. He shouldn't have been able to pull that off. But something inside him had guided his hand. The enemy ship spiraled out of control, flames trailing from its hull. Moments later, it exploded in a brilliant burst of light. Lyrian whooped. That's one down. Grayson's voice came through the radio again. Good work. But we just picked up multiple new signals. The rest of their fleet is on the way. James's hands clenched into fists. The real battle was only beginning. Back at the base, chaos erupted as alerts blared across the screens. Enemy ships had begun appearing at the edge of the solar system, their numbers growing by the minute. Grayson's face was grim. This is it. James and Lyrian landed the ship, quickly making their way back to the command center. Scientists and military officials rushed around them, scrambling to organize Earth's first real defense against an alien invasion. Lyrian turned to James. Looks like your planet is about to get its first real taste of war. James exhaled sharply. He had spent his whole life longing for something more than the quiet isolation of his farm. He never expected this. But there was no going back now. He looked at Lyrian, determination settling in his chest. Then let's make sure we win. She grinned, baring her sharp teeth. Now that's the spirit. The alarms continued to wail. The war for Earth had begun. The base was alive with urgency. The blaring alarms had shifted to a steady pulse, warning of imminent danger. Every screen in the command center displayed the same terrifying truth. The enemy fleet had arrived. James stood in the center of it all, his heart pounding as he took in the dozens of red blips appearing at the edge of the solar system. The enemy was no longer just a distant threat. They were here. Grayson turned to Captain Rains. Alert all defense stations. I want all available pilots in the air immediately. Rains saluted and moved to relay the orders. James clenched his fists. So, what's the plan? Just throw everything we have at them and hope it's enough. Grayson's expression was unreadable. We don't have the luxury of time. This invasion isn't just an attack, it's a test. They want to see what we're capable of. Lyrian's tail flicked. And if we don't impress them? Grayson's eyes darkened. Then they wipe us out. The words sent a chill down James's spine. He turned back to the holographic display, watching as the enemy fleet moved closer. We have one advantage, Rains said, stepping back into the room. They don't know how much we've been preparing. Lyrian smirked. And they definitely don't know about him. James sighed. You keep saying that like it means something. Grayson studied him carefully. It does. Whether you realize it or not. James exhaled, shaking his head. He didn't have time to dwell on the fact that he was somehow at the center of this entire war. Right now, they had a fight to win. The underground hangar was a flurry of activity as pilots strapped into their ships. Engineers ran final checks on weapons systems. The air hummed with anticipation. James stood beside Lyrian, watching as the first wave of Earth's fleet launched into the sky. It was surreal. Just yesterday, he had been a simple farmer. Now, he was about to fly into battle against an enemy no human had ever faced before. Lyrian nudged him. You ready for this, farmer? James let out a slow breath. Not even a little. She grinned. Good. That means you'll be unpredictable. Before he could respond, Grayson approached. Carter, Lyrian, you're in the lead assault squad. Your ship is prepped and waiting. James blinked. Lead squad? Grayson nodded. You proved yourself in that last fight. We need you out there. James hesitated, glancing at Lyrian. She gave him a confident nod. All right, he muttered. Let's do this. They sprinted toward their fighter, strapping in as the engines roared to life. The moment the hangar doors opened, James felt the same pull in his gut that he had during the simulation, except this time, it was real. Lyrian took the controls, guiding the ship into the sky. James clenched his fists. This was it. The moment they broke through the atmosphere, James saw it, the enemy fleet. Dozens of sleek black warships hovered in the darkness, their massive forms silhouetted against the distant stars. Smaller fighters zipped between them like swarming insects, shifting into attack formations. Earth's fleet moved into position, their blue thrusters burning bright. A voice crackled over the radio. Grayson. All units, engage on my command. James's pulse pounded in his ears. Fire! The battle erupted in an instant. Laser fire streaked across space, explosions lighting up the void. Fighters weaved through the chaos, dodging enemy fire while returning their own. Lyrian banked hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a plasma blast. Hold on, farmer! James gritted his teeth, gripping the targeting controls. His instincts screamed at him, telling him where to aim, where the enemy would move next. He fired. The shot hit dead on, blasting an enemy fighter to pieces. Lyrian whistled. Damn. Nice shot. James didn't answer. He was too focused. They twisted through the battlefield, taking out targets one by one. But then, something changed. A deep, guttural voice echoed over the comms, sending a chill through James's spine. You are not prepared for this war, Earthlings. James felt something stir inside him, a feeling he couldn't explain. Lyrian's ears flattened. That's their commander. James exhaled. Then let's make sure he remembers us. They dove back into the fray. The war for Earth had begun in earnest. James had never experienced true chaos before, not like this. Space was a storm of flashing lasers, twisting ships, and blinding explosions. Earth's fleet engaged in fierce combat with the enemy's sleek, black warships, each exchange of fire shaking the void like a thunderstorm in the heavens. Lyrian banked hard to the right, narrowly dodging a plasma bolt that would have torn them apart. Damn it! James swore, gripping the targeting controls. This is insanity! Lyrian grinned unfazed. Welcome to war, farmer! James's heart pounded in his chest. He had no training, no experience, yet somehow, his hands knew what to do. He aimed at an enemy fighter that was on the tail of an Earth pilot, and fired. The shot landed perfectly, sending the hostile craft spiraling into oblivion. Lyrian let out a low whistle. Not bad. James barely registered her words. Something deep inside him had awakened. His body reacted before his mind could catch up, dodging, aiming, firing. He knew where the enemy was moving before they even moved. Lyrian, he said through clenched teeth. I think something's happening to me. She glanced at him, golden eyes narrowed. Yeah, I've noticed. You're flying like a veteran ace. James swallowed hard. I shouldn't know how to do this. Lyrian's tail flicked as she pulled them into a sharp loop, avoiding a missile lock. Looks like your DNA is waking up, farmer. James barely had time to process that before the comms crackled. Earth fleet, be advised. The enemy flagship is moving into position. Grayson's voice followed immediately after. All units, focus fire on their command ship. We have to stop them before they deploy ground forces. James turned his head toward the battlefield and felt his stomach drop. The enemy flagship was monstrous, easily 5 times the size of any Earth carrier, its hull bristling with weapons. The sheer presence of it sent a ripple of dread through the battlefield. Lyrian's ears flattened. Well, that's a problem. James clenched his jaw. Not if we blow it up first. Lyrian grinned. Now that's the spirit. She pushed the throttle to maximum, and they rocketed toward the flagship. The closer they got, the worse it looked. The flagship's shields were absorbing everything Earth's fleet threw at it. Fighters swarmed around the massive vessel like angry hornets, but nothing seemed to break through. Lyrian clicked her tongue. We need a new plan. James's instincts screamed at him. There was something there, something they weren't seeing. He focused, his mind racing. Then, suddenly, he knew. There's a weak spot, he said. Lyrian blinked. What? James pointed at a cluster of vents along the flagship's starboard side. Right there. That's their shield generator exhaust. If we hit it with enough firepower. Lyrian's eyes widened. We drop their shields. James nodded. Lyrian's grin turned predatory. Oh, I like you, farmer. She flicked on the comms. Grayson, we've got a plan. We need heavy fire on the starboard exhaust vents. It's their weak spot. There was a pause. Then Grayson's voice came through, steady and sharp. You'd better be right about this, Carter. James exhaled. I know I'm right. Grayson didn't question him further. Moments later, a new wave of Earth's fighters broke formation and zeroed in on the target. Lyrian accelerated, weaving through enemy fire as they approached the vents. All right, farmer. Time to see if you're really as special as they say. James lined up the shot, feeling something click in his mind. The targeting reticle locked onto the vent. He pulled the trigger. The missile streaked forward. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a massive explosion rippled across the flagship's hull. The shields flickered, then collapsed. The comms erupted with cheers. Grayson's voice was sharp. All units, concentrate fire! Take that damn ship down! James let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Lyrian whooped. Hell yeah! That was beautiful, farmer! But they weren't out of it yet. The enemy flagship, now vulnerable, began to turn. Its main cannons powered up, targeting Earth's fleet. James's eyes widened. They're trying to take as many of us out as they can before they go down. Lyrian's expression turned serious. We need to finish them now. Before James could respond, the deep, guttural voice from before crackled over the radio once more. Impressive. But not enough. A cold shiver ran down James's spine. He knew that voice. Somehow, deep in his bones, he knew it. Lyrian's ears flattened. Who the hell is that? James swallowed hard. I think it's their leader. Lyrian's grip on the controls tightened. Then let's show him what we can do. She pushed the ship forward, diving straight toward the flagship. The battle raged around them, but James barely noticed. His focus was locked on the enemy leader's voice, echoing in his mind. You are not like the others, human. You were meant for something greater. James gritted his teeth. Shut up. Lyrian glanced at him. You okay? James shook his head. No. But we're finishing this. They closed in on the flagship, dodging debris and enemy fire. Earth's fleet was giving everything they had, bombarding the exposed hull. Fires erupted along the enemy ship's body, but it was still alive. James's instincts screamed again. The bridge, he said suddenly. We need to take out the bridge. Lyrian's tail flicked. Bold move. James met her gaze. Can you get me close enough? Lyrian grinned. Oh, I love this plan. She pushed the engines to max. James lined up his shot, feeling his heartbeat slow as everything clicked into place. He locked onto the massive command window at the front of the ship. This was it. He pulled the trigger. The missile streaked forward and slammed directly into the bridge. A deafening explosion engulfed the entire front of the flagship. Fire and debris spiraled outward as the ship began to break apart. James barely had time to register the victory before Lyrian yanked the controls, pulling them out of the blast radius. Behind them, the flagship erupted in a blinding detonation. Silence fell over the battlefield. Then, cheers erupted across the comms. The flagship is down! I repeat, the flagship is down! James exhaled, feeling his entire body sag with exhaustion. Lyrian laughed, exhilarated. Damn, farmer! I knew you had it in you. James managed a tired smirk. Guess I'm full of surprises. But even as Earth's fleet began pushing the enemy back, James had the sinking feeling that this war was far from over. And that voice, the one that had spoken to him, wasn't done with him yet. The enemy flagship was gone, reduced to a burning mass of debris drifting through the void. The battlefield, once a chaotic storm of energy blasts and explosions, was now eerily still. James slumped back in his seat, his fingers still wrapped around the targeting controls. His breathing was heavy, his body tense. Lyrian let out a low whistle. Damn, farmer! You just took down the biggest ship in their fleet. James exhaled, shaking his head. I don't even know how I did that. Lyrian's golden eyes studied him carefully. I do. Your instincts are something else. The comms crackled, and Grayson's voice came through, steady but relieved. Carter, Lyrian, you two just gave Earth its first real victory in this war. Good work. James let out a slow breath. Did we get them all? Captain Rains chimed in. Not yet. We're still mopping up the stragglers, but their formation is broken. Without their flagship, they're disorganized. Lyrian smirked. Told you they'd regret underestimating us. James's hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline faded. The realization hit him. He had just fought in an actual space battle. And won. But the voice from before still echoed in his mind. You were meant for something greater. James swallowed hard. He didn't know what that meant, but he had a bad feeling it wasn't over yet. After the battle, the surviving ships of Earth's fleet regrouped at the hidden military base. As soon as James and Lyrian landed, a group of engineers rushed toward their fighter, cheering and clapping them on the back. Damn fine flying, one of them said. Never seen a civilian pull off shots like that, another added. James felt overwhelmed by the attention. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight. Lyrian grinned, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Told you he was special. James sighed. I'm just a farmer. Grayson approached, his expression unreadable. Not anymore. James opened his mouth to argue, but Grayson cut him off. We need to talk. Now. Minutes later, James and Lyrian sat in the command center while Grayson and Rains reviewed battle footage. You knew exactly where to hit, Rains said, eyes locked on James. You called that weak spot before our scanners even registered it. James shifted uncomfortably. I don't know how. I just felt it. Grayson exchanged a look with Rains before turning back to James. That voice you heard, it wasn't random, was it? James hesitated, then shook his head. No. It felt like. I knew it. Like I'd heard it before, even though I never have. Lyrian's tail flicked. That's not normal, farmer. Grayson's jaw tightened. There's something connecting you to them. And we need to find out what it is before it's too late. James exhaled. So what now? Rains folded her arms. We need to dig into your past. If there's anything buried in your DNA that explains this, we'll find it. James didn't like the sound of that. But what choice did he have? Fine, he muttered. Do what you have to do. Lyrian leaned in. Don't worry, farmer. I'll make sure they don't poke you too much. James smirked despite himself. Appreciate it. But deep down, he knew, whatever they found, it was going to change everything. The medical bay was sterile and brightly lit, a stark contrast to the battlefield James had just left. A team of scientists and doctors ran tests, scans, blood work, genetic mapping. James sat still as they worked, his mind racing. Lyrian stood nearby, arms crossed. I still say we could have just cut you open and taken a peek inside. James shot her a glare. Not helping. She grinned. Come on, farmer. If you are secretly part alien, wouldn't you want to know? James sighed. I don't feel alien. Before Lyrian could respond, one of the scientists turned to them, his face pale. Sir? You need to see this. Grayson, Rains, and Lyrian stood beside James as the scientists displayed the results on a large screen. At first, it looked like a normal DNA sequence. But then, as they zoomed in, something changed. Strange, glowing symbols flickered in the strands. Patterns that weren't human. James's stomach turned. What the hell is that? The lead scientist took a deep breath. It's a genetic marker we've never seen before. Something designed. James's blood ran cold. Designed? Grayson's voice was grim. James, you weren't born with this. Someone put it in you. James stared at the screen, his heart pounding. You're saying someone altered me? The scientist nodded. And not just recently. This goes back generations. Your family line, your entire ancestry, has been carrying this. Lyrian's tail flicked, her expression unreadable. That means they've been here before. Grayson exhaled. Or worse, they left something behind. James gritted his teeth. So you're telling me my whole life, my whole family's life, has been some kind of experiment? The scientist hesitated. We don't know for sure. But your DNA, it's linked to something ancient. James clenched his fists. He had always thought he was just an ordinary man. A farmer. But now, he was something else entirely. Before anyone could process the revelation, the command center alarms blared. Incoming transmission, encrypted frequency. James's blood turned to ice. He knew who it was before the screen even flickered on. The image was distorted at first. Then, slowly, the figure took shape, a towering, armored being with cold, glowing eyes. The same voice that had haunted James in battle echoed through the room. You are awakening at last. James's entire body went rigid. Who are you? He demanded. The figure tilted its head. You already know. James's fists tightened. Why do I know you? The voice was calm, almost amused. Because you are one of us. Silence fell. James felt his breath leave his lungs. Lyrian stiffened beside him. Grayson's face was unreadable. What do you mean? The being's glowing eyes locked onto James. Your blood carries our legacy. Our will. You were created to lead us. James's stomach twisted. That's a damn lie. The figure chuckled. Deny it if you wish. But the truth is within you. And soon you will embrace it. The transmission cut out. James barely heard the others talking around him. He was still staring at the screen, his hands shaking. Lyrian placed a firm hand on his shoulder. James! He turned to her, his voice hollow. I don't know who I am anymore. She met his gaze, serious now. Then let's find out. Together. James took a deep breath, nodding. Because no matter what, he wasn't facing this alone. James stood at the center of the command room, his mind reeling from what he had just heard. You were created to lead us. Those words echoed in his skull like a curse. The enemy leader had spoken to him like he was one of them, like he was meant to stand by their side. No. He wasn't their pawn. He wasn't their weapon. He was James Carter, a farmer who had lived his whole life working the land. And if they thought he was just going to roll over and accept their claim on him, they had another thing coming. Lyrian's hand rested firmly on his shoulder. You okay, farmer? James let out a slow breath. Yeah. I know what I have to do. Grayson folded his arms. And what's that? James looked up at the screen, where the enemy fleet loomed closer to Earth. We end this. Right here. Right now. Grayson nodded. Then let's make our move. The war had been raging for hours. The enemy's forces had regrouped, larger and more determined than before. The skies above Earth were once again filled with fire and chaos. James and Lyrian's fighters streaked through space, weaving through enemy ships. You sure you're up for this? Lyrian called over the comms. James smirked. I'm done running. They dove into battle. James's hands moved instinctively, guiding the ship through the storm of laser fire. Every shot he took was precise, every maneuver perfect. It was as if something deep inside him had fully awakened his true potential. But the enemy was relentless. Earth's fleet was holding strong, but they couldn't keep this up forever. Then James saw it, the real target. The enemy command ship. He muttered. That's where he is. Lyrian followed his gaze. You thinking what I'm thinking? James nodded. We take him out, we end this. Lyrian grinned. Then let's do it. James and Lyrian broke through the enemy lines, dodging every blast that came their way. The command ship loomed before them, a fortress of metal and fire. We're not getting through those defenses, Lyrian warned. James's mind raced. Then it hit him. I am the key, he whispered. Lyrian frowned. What? James tightened his grip on the controls. They think I'm one of them. Maybe I can use that. He switched their ship's signature to match the enemy's frequency. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the defenses opened. Lyrian's eyes widened. No way. James exhaled. It's now or never. They shot forward, weaving through the massive warship's interior corridors until they reached the core. This is it, James said, standing before the enemy leader, face to face at last. The figure studied him, amused. You came. James clenched his fists. You don't own me. The enemy leader tilted his head. But you are ours. You belong with us. James shook his head. No. I belong here. With my people. With her. Lyrian smirked. Damn right he does. James raised his weapon. Goodbye. He fired. The blast struck true. The enemy leader fell. And the war ended. The enemy fleet collapsed the moment their leader was gone. Without their guiding force, they retreated, their once imposing presence shattered. James and Lyrian barely made it out of the command ship before it erupted in a fiery explosion. When they landed back on Earth, the cheers were deafening. The war was over. Grayson clapped James on the back. You did it, Carter. James let out a breath. We all did. Lyrian grinned beside him. So what now, farmer? James looked at her, at the stars above, at the world he had fought for. I think I'm going home. Lyrian's tail flicked. You really want to go back to the farm after all this? James chuckled. Yeah. But I was hoping I wouldn't go back alone. Lyrian blinked. Then she smirked. You asking me to be your farmhand? James grinned. Something like that. She purred, wrapping her arms around him. I think I can make that work. And as the stars twinkled above, James knew his life would never be the same. But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't alone. And that was enough.